Thanks for having me. How do you follow those stories? They're pretty exciting and they're kind of only going this way, which is quite fun to watch. My story is a little bit different to that. It's kind of had a few more ups and downs. I've started a bit slower earlier because I didn't go to university, but I've started a bit slower. So all I'm going to try and share with you, you've learned tons of the knowledge where you're getting your knowledge from is the place to get it from. You know, Dave McClure, Steve Blanks, that's brilliant. So you've heard all the good stuff. All I'm going to try and do is give you an honest account, as honest as I can be, about the ups and downs that I've encountered over the last 4 or 5 years. Because for me, it's not all been roses. I don't know, about the roller coasters, when you go to Thorpe Park or whatever, I've kind of got a love-hate relationship with them. I'm up for it, and I get there, and I've got to get on that roller coaster because you've paid far too much. If you didn't get your 2 buy one get one free from the newspaper, you're thinking, I've queued for an hour, so I've got to do it. And then when you're going up it, you're thinking, oh, bollocks, why did I do this? Why am I doing this to myself? And and you've got all these kind of mixed emotions, and that's, to be honest, how I feel when I'm going through different stages of startup. When I was 19, I worked for a guy for 6 months after I left school. I knew I didn't want to go to uni. And after about 6 months, we didn't really agree on how to run the business, and I realised I couldn't sell properly, so I said to him, why can't I just build a sales team for you? Just sort of hide the fact that I was no good at selling, and by them selling well, it might make me look good. Anyway, it worked, but then he started firing without talking to me and stuff like that, so I didn't really like it. We're still really good friends now, but it didn't work to work together, so I left there with his kind of foot up my rear, and I set up my own company called Broad Place. Started, as Dave was saying, hired people, everybody I knew, school dropouts and friends and all sorts of different people, and we started managing people's ads on Google, just as an agency, and SMEs who weren't getting the kind of agency attention or attention direct from Google. And we did really well. I started when I was 19, grew it over 2 years to about 200 companies we were looking after in the UK, got up to about 20 staff, over in Leatherhead in Surrey, where I still live. And it was an awesome ride, a load of fun, and then a guy who used to run Party Poker offered to buy the business. He was trying to kind of consolidate the market a bit. So it wasn't like my big kind of Zuckerberg or whatever kind of value exit, but it was enough to get free, and I never thought, I'd be running a business, let alone having a chance to exit, So it's probably, it's less than the rounds of funding you're talking about, but it's enough to get free, start thinking about what I really wanted to do. So that company's doing well now. It's up to about 100 staff, and they're doing really good. A few of the guys are still there. But I finished Broad Place, and I was born in Johannesburg in South Africa. And the problem is like, you might think, oh, wow, there's loads of things there. But the reason is, if they'd all gone blindingly well, then I probably wouldn't have quite so many. So don't be deceived. But I went to South Africa. I was born there, and I just sort of had this. I kind of went on a bit of a journey. I won't go too much into it now, but I started asking the question, like, what needs to be done? What needs to be done in the world, and how can I sort of play my part to do that? Because I had this kind of space to think about it now. So I did a few wacky things. If anyone's heard of Jane Goodall, I went and spent some time with her in Chicago. I met up with Jamie Drummond, who runs the One campaign, or Make Poverty History, and all that kind of stuff, along with hanging out with a bunch of other people. It was an awesome time. I absolutely loved it. In the end, I went to South Africa, and I took the business model that I had, found some local partners, and tried to set up a small business doing the same thing called, well, it wasn't called ClickEgo at the time. As you say, things change over time. It was called Andy Yaz, which means I don't know. But I don't know. Well, it was hard doing local partnerships because you let them trying to give authority and autonomy to the local kind of franchise, effectively, and they do things that you wouldn't necessarily want to do. So what I tried to do was try and get, obviously South Africa's moved on a lot, but it's still got a lot of segregation. So what I thought is, if we got a little company where we had a couple of guys from the black townships, a couple of coloured guys, Afrikaner, white guy, English guy, and kind of all put them in a group together, in a team together, we'll just see what happens and see if the relationships start messing stuff up. I've seen that happen even in my house. I live with a few different people, and in my area there was a few different churches, and they were all completely separate and didn't really talk to each other. And I invited a couple of people from different churches to come live with me, and it started messing up all the relational networks. And I loved seeing that happen. So we started trying to figure that out. That completely flopped after I left, and I went back the next year and found some new partners, and we revived it, and GetGiving was born. I went to Brazil in Florianopolis, Actually, Cressuma is not quite as sexy. It's just down the road, a couple of hours away from Florianopolis. And I went and did the same model over there. I just went for a short period of time to help some guys launch the model there. But by then, I kind of fine-tuned how to do the business. And then I came back to London, and one of my mates runs a charity in Roehampton called Regenerate, working with kids in gangs, helping them exit the gangs, realising all the issues that are around that. There's a lot of identity issues, a lot of family issues, blah, blah, blah. So we thought, wonder if we can use some of the same tools, build a small business together where they work in together as a family, they meet together in the morning, have breakfast, have a chance to be together, to be a family basically, go out and do the work in the community, get inquiries in, this driveway needs doing, this bush needs cutting, whatever, and trying to build up a thing like that. It worked well, but not well enough to replicate. I was hoping it would spread like the mustard seed, and we'd have these popping up all over the show. But it worked for those guys, but it wasn't strong enough to replicate. I launched into a tutoring business called Teach Me Too, taking guys like you who are awesome at your subjects and tutoring high school kids in those relevant subjects. Did pretty well, but what I realised was it could have been big enough. It didn't feel big enough to satisfy me, so I was kind of became this like bit of a Del boy, kind of, you know, I've got my finger here, finger in that pie, finger in that pie, and I was doing a few different things, thinking that was that's who I was. What I realised was just the idea wasn't strong enough or big enough for me to feel like I could put all of myself into it. In the end, that's kind of just sitting there now. The website's still there, but I don't throw any Google ads at it anymore, so everything died out. It's completely, you know, dependent on the ads, and turn them off. You've got no business. Turn them on. You've got a business. So that just sits there now. And Ubid Media was a friend of mine's business that I helped him do a startup. It was about selling distressed ad inventory in newspapers, and I worked with that with the board for about 6 months, helping them out. Right, which then leads me to where we are now. Yeah, so I then started thinking. I was chatting with my mentors, thinking about, right, what am I going to do? I've kind of had an awesome journey, travelled loads of places, done loads of cool stuff. But what's next? You know, and I thought I need to start fishing about. So I hung out actually at PayPal's offices. They had a charity hack, and a friend of mine had come up with an idea. What if we could give, you know, everyone just gave one. The idea was just give one. Everyone in the country, if you could just get them to give £1 or whatever. So I went with that sort of mindset going to this charity hack, thinking about what can we do about micro donations. PayPal just released their new payments platform, the Adaptive Payments API, which is, if you go to x.com, you'll see their innovative payment solutions. And so I sort of came up with a group of guys there with the idea of GetGiving. It's an iPhone application dovetailed into Missionfish, which is the eBay for charity charitable database. And we built this iPhone app over the next 6 months or whatever, and then tried to launch it, and then Apple kicked back at us, didn't like the in-app donations, and funnily enough, not too different to your story, them kicking back, me going to the press, blah blah blah, actually caused a huge amount of stir in the sector. I mean, obviously it wasn't on the front page of the Times or something, but you know, within the charity sector, it caused a bit of a stir. Managed to get Nick Hurd, our Minister for Civil Society, to go meet with Apple, blah blah blah. Kicked it right up, and I started getting invited to all sorts of crazy stuff that you shouldn't get invited to, like gift aid reform round tables, and you know, this kind of stuff. But funnily enough, if you hang around those places long enough, you do actually get to know what you're talking about. And funnily enough, I know quite a lot about gift aid now. So we started working on that. That got rejected. In the meantime, I had gone back to John Lunn, who's a director at PayPal, and I said to him, John, this payment stuff's awesome. I'm in Wired magazine. I'm all over the show, and I've done nothing yet. We haven't even delivered a product. This is incredible, you know. And I said, look, I want to do something for the commercial sector. And he said, look, do a mobile shopping cart. I actually came to him with like 4 ideas that I thought were like pretty spot on. I was like, you know, and he was like, no, we're doing it, someone else is doing it, that's crap, don't do that. And he said, look, do a mobile shopping cart. So I thought, that's actually not a bad idea, because, you know, we've got all these shopping cart solutions out there, and obviously it will become a populated space, but there's not really a decent solution that's dovetailed into PayPal at that time. But I was a bit scared, because you guys are going for like kind of top level businesses, you know, and I'm scared of the top 5, you know, whatever, Facebook, PayPal, Google, Apple. You probably name a couple of others that I am actually scared of, and I like to leverage off them as much as possible. Like with my first business, Google, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel or create a platform, we're just trying to add a bit of value for those clients that don't get any value. So I was thinking, right, how can we leverage PayPal in the same way? And I was a bit scared that we would get flattened by some Silicon Valley startup or whatever. So I thought, what do we have that those boys don't have? And I thought, well, we've got the London accent, we've got the London boutiques, you know, we've got that kind of prestigious kind of feel that Silicon Valley doesn't really have. New York has it, but the Silicon Valley boys don't really have it. Also, given where mobile phones were at that stage, and still are to the greatest extent, how much you hear about Android and all this kind of stuff, reality is most of the transactions of purchases going through at the moment, especially in this sector, are still on Apple devices. So we thought, actually, a bit decent place to position the business. Gives us a bit more of a niche, as you were talking about, gives us, get away from the projector, gives us a bit more of a niche and a bit more likelihood that we'll stand up against the competition when it does pile in. And I'll talk about Givey in a little bit as well. I love 24, sorry if you don't love it, but I think joke about it. I actually met him in Cape Town. He was on my flight one day when I was going to Cape Town, so that was an absolute result. And yeah, so I think the biggest thing for me about entrepreneurship or whatever, you talked about sort of determination, and I think it's all about everything you do is dictated by your identity and where you build your identity. And it's been so long since I've earned any money. All I've been doing is like a bit like your graph, you know, you know, it's just gone off the back end, and I haven't earned any money in the last 4 years at all. And what happens though is I'm very used to a constantly changing environment. I'm very, very used to failure now, and I'm very used to not getting paid for what I do. And I think if you can get used to that environment, then it's easier to continue working in startup when you're not getting the success as quickly as you want. I think the problem is when people go into the city, you start earning we were talking earlier about, you know, you start earning your 30 or 50 or 100 grand, it's very hard to give up if you start getting used to that lifestyle. So in some ways I'm really happy that I never sort of went down that route. You know, I live in a log cabin at the end of my own property. When I sold my company, I sort of spent half of it on a property and spent half of it on travelling, investing in these different companies and stuff like that. I've now got absolutely nothing left. In fact, I was just saying earlier, this is where the honest part comes in. I was like, right, what I'll do is I'll invest some in property so I can live, and I'll keep 15 grand aside as my emergency wedding fund. So that at least when I meet, you know, if I ever do meet my wife, she'll be like, she'll be gutted that obviously I had some money and then I lost it all, you know, potentially. But at least I've got like this honeymoon fund and we can spend 6 months travelling, whatever. But unfortunately, I've just had to cash that in. And, so I think my bachelor eligibility's just gone down a few notches for sure. But the reality is, when you're in it, I've now found something that captures me, do you know what I mean? That is like, it's a big enough opportunity to take all of me. And at the moment, I'm not considering selling the house, but it is a possibility. But it's very unlikely because where I've got it set up, I've got 4 mates living in the house, and I built this log cabin. I didn't build it, I wish I did, it'd be rude. You know, that would give me more bachelor points, wouldn't it? But no, got this log cabin built at the end of my garden, which is awesome for me, because it's completely sort of off the grid, if you know what I mean. It's analog, so when you're working with tech all day and iPhones and crap like that, you know, you come home to the shed and the guitar, and it's a nice change. And that way I'm a bit more sustainable. I don't have high outgoings. I probably spend most on aeroplanes and on food. And the other thing is, and this is probably, you know, the most somber part of it, but just getting real with you, I think it was 6 weeks ago, we're at this crunch point where we've kind of gone down the route of doing agency stuff alongside building product to help sort of bolster up our outgoings. So I've got 5 or 6 guys that are working with me, including Patrick over here. And they're really, really committed. I'm really lucky to have such a committed team. They are friends, and some of them have worked with me in my old business. But the reality is, none of them get paid what they should get paid. And you know, they really committed and stick through with me, even when the money's not always there. As we've got more and more focused on our product, the revenues have been declining and declining because it was sort of artificially kept high because of the agency work we're doing. Now we're focused almost completely on our product. There's almost no revenues there, and it's very unsustainable. So about 6 weeks ago, I didn't have enough money in the bank account at that point to pay everybody what they were owed. In fact, I didn't even have probably 50% of what was required. Our costs at the moment are pretty much just office and staff, and I didn't probably even have 50%. And believe it or not, I was so gutted about this that I sort of excused myself from the office, went down the road a little bit, and I hid behind a bush. It wasn't quite in the bush, but I hid behind the bush and just cried my eyes out. I was crying for about 5 minutes, just absolutely gutted that these guys are so committed to what we're doing, and I couldn't provide for them like I should. And I think what I've been learning though over the last few weeks is that this roller coaster it is intense. Like, it is an intense roller coaster, especially if you do the journey with friends, which is my favourite way to do it. A couple of the guys that work with me live with me as well, so it's a very intense environment, but I absolutely love it. I wouldn't have it any other way. But it does mean it's not just some guy that you hired that you can't afford to pay, sorry about that mate, see you later, or whatever. These guys, it's actually more of a traditional business model. I went to Scotland last weekend to get a break and stay with my friend who lives and works on a farm, and my payment for staying on the farm was doing 3 hours labour on the farm in the morning, and I stayed in a horse box 500 metres, which is a long way away from everybody else, and I got woken up by the sheep. It was fantastic. What I realised was it's a very old business model to work, to people live with you and work with you and just sort of pay your way and that kind of thing. But what I kind of think I'm learning at the moment is I've always associated emotions with weakness, but really I kind of think now kind of inaction is weakness. You know, emotions is part of the course. If you want to do anything hard or anything that's tricky, you're going to get upset at times, you know what I mean? It's going to be hard, you're going to be upset and angry, and actually where I've seen people sort of try and chug that down just to look strong or whatever, actually it kind of hurts in the long run. They snap at somebody later in the day, they do this or that, and so I'm trying to be as honest with my emotions as possible with my staff and with, you know, with you guys today, because I actually think that to sustain the hard period, you have to be alright with that. I have to be alright with the fact that that doesn't make me weak. What makes me weak if I say, sorry guys, you know, I'm packing it in, do you know what I mean? Or you're packing it in, do you know what I mean? Because I've had enough of you or whatever. Or if I snap at someone. So it's just a new take for me on emotions. I won't go into it in detail, but just looking at the ingredients you've got as a startup. You know, I was looking at my ingredients. You know, I'm not the sharpest tool in the box. I'm not as clever as anybody in this room. I don't have incredibly good ideas, but what I do know is I know people who are smart, so I ask them, I ask John Lunn, what's a good idea? You tell me a good idea. And, you know, I try and tag myself onto those bigger companies that are going places and think, well, if I can get a small piece of their pie, then we might be getting somewhere, you know, and collaborative approaches. Givey, which is the newest, Mosho, by the way, is a mobile shopping platform. At the moment, it's providing mobile shopping cart stuff to luxury brands. But as the ideas evolve, we're actually looking to, we're acquiring users through this process. We aggregate one-click payments through PayPal sort of payment system, which sort of allows the SME to compete with the Amazon kind of one-click. If any of you have got one, has anyone got Amazon one-click? None of you have got it activated, a couple of you got it activated. It is a dangerous thing, but it's even worse if you've got it all over the show. But it's good for us, and it is what people want on a mobile. You're used to it with your iTunes account and all that kind of stuff. So with Givey is, we went back to the drawing board when Apple blocked us, and I got a team of guys together, including John Lunn. I've got them together, sorry, I was at this charity hack and I pulled them all into a room for a few minutes and said, like, how can we solve this problem? The problem still exists. Can't make simple, quick, easy donations on your mobile to whatever charity you want with gift aid. And we got back in the room again, and I contributed a bit to the idea. A friend of mine, Alan Cole, contributed this idea, which was, can we make donations via Twitter? And we started thinking about it, and we figured out a way to do it with a pre-approval key from PayPal. If you register a Givey account, you can register your mobile number, register your Twitter handle, and then actually, if you make a tweet that says, like, you know, #Givey @NSPCC5, that will actually make the donation. We check that it's a registered user, that you've got the pre-approval, that it's a reasonable number, and that actually makes the donation. And that's going live on the 23rd of this month over at 10 Downing Street. We're launching it, which will be fun as part of the Big Society Day. So that's going to be a lot of fun. But yeah, going back to this, we're looking at ingredients. I'm thinking, right, realistically, what can I do? You know, I'm optimistic already, I know that, so I'm not going to be too, you know, let's be realistic. What have I got? And I think in a startup team, you can call them what you want, but you need somebody who's relational, who can have good conversations, get people on side. You need somebody who can really sort of push the paper and get some people to sign off, you know, actually make some money. I'm not actually very good at making any money, and I realised that the hard way in this business. In my first business, I had a sales guy join with me almost straight away called Simon Kelly, who now runs his own business with about 10 staff doing really well. But he joined me straight away, and we started making money almost, you know, second month or whatever. We started, you know, scaling, adding a member of staff every month. And I guess I kind of took too much credit for that. I thought maybe I was good at making money. The reality was he was good at making money, but it made me feel like I was. In this business, I've realised, actually, I'm not that great at making money. I need to get people on side who are great at making money. And then there's obviously looking at the operations of the business and the technical side of the product. And that can be just two people. You know, in Dave's situation, he's looking at most of it, and the other guy, Andy, is looking at the technicals. You know, but sometimes, if you don't have the ingredients, you need to make sure you've got them there. One of Dave McClure's concepts, I think, is an lean startup. But basically, I am finding it so much easier to attract interest and finance into the projects. Once, I call it, B, C and AD. Once they go past day 0, so much easier to get interest in the business. However much people like your idea, because that's basically all it is when it's in development. It's a glorified idea. Once it goes past go, it's so much easier to get finance. So I definitely subscribe to this idea, which is with your own cash or with a couple of close people's cash who really are buying into you rather than buying into necessarily how good your business plan is or whatever. Try and get it, minimum viable product, get it to day 0, get it to day 1, make a little bit of money, a couple of soft clients, and then you'll find it a lot easier to get people's interest. One book that I found really, really awesome is a guy called Seth Godin, The Dig. It's really short, it's about this big, 80 pages. The simple principle is a lot of people quit when they shouldn't and don't quit when they should, and he kind of unpacks that theory. And that's something else that really helps me through the times where you're thinking, what on earth am I doing? Why don't I get my butt on the plane with all the air miles I've got from having poor cash flow and spending on my Amex card the whole time, and get on the plane, go to Cape Town, drink a Savannah Dry and work on the business that's out there already, Sometimes you need to remember why you're doing what you're doing and not doing something easier. If anybody read it in TechCrunch the other day, we were talking about it just before I started with Martin. They were sort of saying the optimum age or you peak as an entrepreneur at 25, and I think they went on to say 27, which I was a bit surprised that they were saying that, but it is something I've thought of. In terms of my network, I'm struggling to recruit at the moment because all my friends are getting a bit older now and they're earning more, running their own companies, done well off the bat, maybe working with me or not with me, and I struggle to find them. What I do think is important if you're doing an early, like a startup as a younger person, is that you have a really solid and varied board of personal advisors, like your own mentors, and then also building up a good professional advisory board. These are like my kind of personal mentors. They're not really for the business. I mean, John is kind of on both sides, but Rob was the guy I just spent a few days up in Scotland with. My dad's fantastic, he's kind of my financial director, but actually more and more now he's more the opposite. He's trying to tell me to chill out and spend more time on myself. And Patrick is a futurist who goes around the world lecturing to the top companies on the future of what's going to happen, which is also helpful. As we said, peaking early. As I move forwards, my long-term goal really, with my South African heritage as well, is to the two markets that I love. I love Florianopolis, I love Cape Town as well. They've both got tech communities, beaches and the sun and stuff like that. What I really want to do is siphon out cash from the centres, like from San Francisco, America, from London, and put them into these developing economies, into tech startups, and enjoy the scenery at the same time. That's the next stage for me. So I'm really super excited about that. I love these developing economies. They're all coming online with mobile phones, and they're going to want to buy some stuff, and I want to help them do that, and I want to make some money whilst doing it. The long-term objective for me is still going back to that stage I talked about earlier, where what needs to be done. One of the things I came to that Patrick helped me learn was that actually maybe just giving my time away or just pottering around was a waste of my time. It was almost I was trying to be a nice guy. He said, if you have the opportunity to make money, you can generate cash more so than you need, then you really have a responsibility to do that and then to steward that well. And so I kind of got the vision in my head at that point of locking myself in a cupboard and making just sitting there. Maybe if I made loads of money, that was actually a very dull thought for me. Sitting in a cupboard and making loads of money. I actually kind of almost shamefully kind of like the more heroic story of pulling kids out of dustbins and letting them have a great life and stuff like that. And it sounds a bit stupid to say, but you kind of have these romantic thoughts of what it means to change the world. And actually, I've just realised that I may not make the money. We're only early days in both of these startups. We've taken certain investment on board. We've got some great advisors and investors in the business, and I could go into that another day. But we may or may not make the money. But I just knew I had to give it a go on a bigger scale. Maybe sell out for millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions. We'll have to see. These are my details. If any of you are interested in doing a startup or whatever, I'm kind of gearing up over the next year to start looking at doing more angel investments. I did a couple of years ago, and I'm going to be doing that more, ideally in these developing economies in Brazil and in South Africa, but I do love to hear about any good ideas, and maybe might be able to connect you with the right person if it's not me. But the best way to get me is era@me.com. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, we are open for questions.
That's easy.
With the Twitter payment to you make money from that?
We make 1.25% of the transaction. So, yeah, that's what we make. eBay take 3.75, so the total is 5%. But at the moment, the micro payments that we're talking about, which is between £1 and £10, which we're anticipating being the average payment. Again, we'll find out very soon whether that's true or not. There's no real way to gift aid those at the moment. All the SMS donations, they're great, those mechanisms, but there's no way to sort of gift aid that. So actually the net effect is, with our system, you're 20% up on any other sort of micro donation platform. So.
This is a slightly personal question.
Okay.
I was just wondering, like, what sort of brought you to a more sort of altruistic approach in terms of business? And in the sense that you're sort of like in the charity space, you're trying to like get sort of donations. Or...
Yeah, I mean, if I'm honest with you, there is some stuff that I do that is more of that ilk, kind of enterprise development kind of stuff. And the reason I went to South Africa and followed those people was all that stuff. And I don't know why that is. I guess I was brought up that way. We used to have a little poor box. I used to get my 50p pocket money. I used to put 5p in the poor box, and we sent that to Ethiopia, or at least that's what I was told we did with it. My dad probably, sold it. But no, he didn't really. But to be honest, in terms of the charitable donations, there's not really much. That's just an opportunity that I landed on, a bit like yourself. It's kind of just, wow, people are interested in this. Wow, there must be such a gap of innovation in this space. Let's go with it and see what happens. So I can't really take any kind of altruistic credit or anything like that for that. It's really just an opportunity that we're loving, and we're just seeing how deep the rabbit hole goes, really.
I think it's a great thing to do, but I was just curious, that was all, because
yeah.
You often sort of associate innovation and entrepreneurship with, in a sense, I wouldn't say making money, but sort of creative things to making profits.
I mean, I guess one thing I would say is that I'm a big advocate for people doing what they do for good. So, for example, you might get somebody who's a finance director, and then when he goes to his local charity, he just kind of sweeps the floor. And in some ways, there's something beautiful about that, because it's just about him participating like anybody else. In the other way, it seems mental that he wouldn't be advising them, the small charity, on their finances. Do you know what I mean? And so what we've been doing with Mosho is building, an intricate kind of one-click payment system backed by PayPal. It's not intricate, but it's pretty cool what we've done. And then we just kind of flopping that over for the charity space, and we get credit for it. It's not like I'm doing it to be just, I'm really pure and doing it to be a good guy. We get a lot of credit for it, and I'm loving it. It's great fun. Do you know what I mean? So, but I am a big advocate for that kind of thing. Do what you do and do it flipping well, and then use that, to add value to other places as well.
I think by all accounts you've had a very successful career with lots of ups and downs. I'm just interested to know what has been your biggest regret throughout that roller coaster?
I can't be sure if it is, but the first thing that comes to my mind is when I sold the company. It was a really personal thing for me. When I sold the company, I sat down. I didn't tell anybody I was selling it because I didn't think it was going to happen. So I didn't want everyone to think I'm leaving, I'm not committed, blah blah blah, and then it doesn't go through. And I kept it quiet for 2 months as we were going through the due diligence. And then basically on the day it closed, I basically told him, sat them down and said, guys, look, I'm leaving, the new MD's coming in half an hour's time. And I sat with all of them, or an hour or two, I can't remember, and I sat with everybody individually, and one of my key guys kind of was in tears, and I couldn't realise what it is, and he said basically, you told me, 6 months ago, buck my ideas up or I'm out, and since then I've been completely committed, and he had gone from almost getting fired to the centre of the business. And he said, and I don't know if he said it or whether I just felt it, and you didn't do the same. And in that moment I felt like horrible, because basically what I'd realised was, as the leader, I had asked him to commit to something that I hadn't committed to myself, and I felt absolutely shocking about it. I mean, he's gracious enough that he's forgiven me, and it's all good, but it was a horrible feeling. I'm sure there are more. I'm sure it goes without saying, I made plenty of horrific business decisions and splashed cash all over the shop, on horrible ideas, and I could go on. There's another endless list of another 10 ideas probably that I've taken to some extent, and those are only the ones that are even worth speaking about, do you know what I mean? So there's plenty of those, that's probably another whole session in itself. But
suppose if you were going to invest in an idea, but you have a clear idea of how it's going to, you've addressed basically a need and you've sort of got a solution, but it's in an area that's like beyond you, like it's going more into the tech area. So how would you go about making this idea work?
so you're saying if you've created an idea
Yeah,
that
it's
that addresses a need, but it's beyond your skill base or experience.
Yes.
For me, that's all about, it's about getting it as quickly to a place where other people will be able to catch the vision and understand it, and then just pile people in that understand that space. You know, at the moment with Mosho, I buy this is charity shop, my mate who got too fat gave me this shirt, these jeans are my housemates, and the only thing I spend money on, to be honest, is my shoes. I like nice shoes. And I'm not a luxury guy, is what I'm trying to say. You know, I may appear a little bit like it, but I'm not. And so we've gone for a market that I'm not perfectly fitted for. And so what I've done is got the product to that minimum viable place where it works, people can see it and understand it, got a couple of cool clients on board. What I'm doing now is bolstering out the board. So I've just taken on a girl called Anna Goodmanson, if I can say it right, who's the head of product services at Virtu, which is like the elite kind of, it's like the Rolex of mobile phones, they're like $3,000 or something like that. And so she knows that space inside out. And I'm also in talks with somebody else who's runs one of the big boutique hotel chains about coming on board, because they know that space and I don't know what I'm doing, so I have to learn from them. So I would just say, get it to that minimum viable place where people can see it and it's out of your head and it's on paper and maybe even working, and then just try and rally the troops and get people on board who do know what they do. I think you've got to be really honest about what you don't know, do you know what I mean? Like, there's very few things that I do know, but I just try and be as transparent as possible. And people know where they stand with me, and they know what they're buying into. I think people get disappointed or disheartened if they think you knew something and then you didn't know it in the end. You know what I mean? You weren't as good as you said.
David will also join us for drinks afterwards, but maybe one more question.
Yeah, it seems like you tried a lot and you put in a lot of money in those things. How do you actually evaluate an idea before you go for it? Is that your intuition or your mentors?
Well, like, I can't remember very far. I mean, I can't remember that far back. But like with Givey, with GetGiving, which was the first thing that got me in that space, it was just like we just chatted about it, and we just people liked it. If people like it, I can feel a buzz about it. I sort of throw the nets a bit wider and see whether people that know what they're talking about it like it. So I kind of get the feelers out there, as you say, get out of the building, go talk with people. And I think the thing for me was when the press started liking it, then I was like, wow, it's amazing. We didn't have, GetGiving was never a product, but we got like thousands of hits on the site, and we just had a site up. We basically faked it, to be honest with you. Like, we would have delivered it, and we did submit it to Apple, and it got. But as far as anybody else knows, we didn't have a product at all. Do you know what I mean? So in some ways, I just say the best way to like figure out whether a product is going to work or not is like slap together a little site. I know this is quite cavalier, and not everyone would agree with me, but slap together a site, throw some Google AdWords out there, invite some of the press contacts that you may or may not know, and just say, hey, what do you think about this? Like, and they're questioning. Like, I have come under the cosh in the last 2 months as I've started meeting with like really good angel VC kind of guys, yeah, because I've hit this new level of business I've not been at before, and they are scrutinising me up to the rafters, and analyst companies and stuff like that. Like, they are refining my product for me. When I sit in these meetings, I'm like, crap, I don't know the answer to that. I'm really sorry, I'll get back to you. And that forces me to get better and better, do you know what I mean? And so I would say, I've kind of gone off on a tangent, but yeah, let's go have some drinks.